Will Poskett, a very, very warm welcome to 10Q Interview. I'm looking forward to this one very much. I'm a big fan of your newsletter, so thank you for taking the time today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Chris. Appreciate it.
We'll crack straight on. Why a newsletter? How did Grow Club get started?
It's a great question, actually. I think if I went right back to the beginning, if you ask my English teacher, would Will Poskett ever start a newsletter, she'd probably laugh. She'd probably give that reaction and laugh.
I just laugh because I think mine would probably say the same thing.
Because, and I appreciate you reading the newsletter, by the way, and you'll know, having read it, that there's quite a few typos in there and the grammar can be a bit funky at times. And that's because, I'm proudly dyslexic. I love being dyslexic. Allows me to be creative, think laterally, but it does mean my spelling is very shonky at times. So to answer your question, why a newsletter? Despite being dyslexic, I fell in love with writing.
Okay.
Around about 10 years ago, because I realized the more I write, kind of the better I get at my job, because kind of writing forces you to distill kind of your thought process.
Yeah.
So why did I start Grow Club, and why do I write a newsletter? Well, one is a really selfish reason, which is I basically just wanted to improve my own kind of writing ability, get my thoughts down on paper. But the second one, and probably the punchier answer, is I'm not sure if you can swear on this podcast, but I'll swear and you can edit it out.
You be yourself, Will. Don't worry about it.
There's going to be a lot of swearing then. There's just a lot of bullshit online when it comes to marketing.
Yes.
And I remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, you see all these influencers with big followings just talking absolute, nonsense when it comes to marketing. And I'm sure we've all been frustrated about it. You reply in the comments and going, well, that's wrong. What does that even mean? And it just doesn't get you anywhere. So I thought, right, if you can't beat them, join them. So that's part of the reason is I'm just trying to bring a bit of like clarity and honesty to how marketing actually works. And for the listeners who don't know me, it's like, well, who the hell does this guy think he is? Like having that point of view. Well, I don't have all the answers, but I've been fortunate to work at some of the best, ad agencies in the world, like Widens and Droga, working with brands like Nike, Meta, Amazon. And I just, I apply my experience of like strategy to kind of breaking down how amazing brands and scale-ups and sometimes like creators and how they grew, basically. So to answer your question, why a newsletter? Because I used to be a terrible writer. I enjoy it. I'm trying to get better. And just trying to cut through the bullshit of like marketing online, really. So, yeah.
Have you known about your dyslexia for a long time?
No, I found out quite late, actually. I was 18 at the time. Prior to that, my teachers thought I was lazy and had a bad attitude. And they're like, oh, no, you're just dyslexic.
That's a generation. I mean, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
How old do you think I am? Have a guess.
I don't know. I was going to say 42.
Oh, mate, that's harsh. I turned 40 last month, actually.
I am looking at you on a very tiny monitor.
Yeah. Trying to backtrack now. Thanks very much. Yeah. This is an audio-only podcast, I hope.
Yeah, I'll get the filters out. Don't worry. It's weird, isn't it? Like dyslexia. I mean, there's a kid in my class at school who's dyslexic, and they said the same thing. Like lazy, he used to always get sent to the headmaster and all sorts. And what I was trying to work out is if you think it held you back, but I'm kind of assuming it didn't too much.
Yeah, I think it drove me forward in two ways. So my GCSEs were pretty average, to be honest.
Okay.
But A levels, I got straight A's, and the reason for that is I don't know. I've got a real chip on my shoulder. Maybe when someone says
prove someone wrong.
Exactly that, mate. Exactly that. So as soon as I found out, I'm like, well, I'm not stupid. So I just actually started working and applying myself.
Okay.
So that drove me forward. Went to good uni, blah blah blah, and then. But also, I do think like. It's actually something I wrote in my newsletter today, actually, about like what is good strategy, like what to avoid with, what to avoid if you want to write great strategy.
Yeah.
And actually, I think one of the enemies of great strategy or great marketing is intellectualism, like almost being a bit too clever. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And I think one thing dyslexics are fairly good at is kind of reduction, simplification, but also lateral thinking. So I think, it does offer me a bit, I think it gives me a unique skill set in the kind of the world that we're in, if that makes sense.
It's funny you bring that up, actually, because I'd never really spoken about that before, but I had that exact conversation with someone last week, and we were talking about someone who's a bit of a know-it-all when it came to marketing.
Yeah.
And actually, me and this other person both agreed that in our independent ways, who knew this other person who thought that, was like really surprised because he wasn't.
Yeah.
But it's a thing you do see in marketing a lot.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of
it's like a confirmation bias almost when something works. And I mean, it comes back to the whole kind of the LinkedIn guru thing, right? You get one thing that works, and it's like, right, that's what I'm going to sell. But in the wider scheme of things, it's not great.
Niche down on it, yeah. No, there's definitely. Do you know what the Donald Kruger effect? Do you know what that is?
Yeah,
there's
Dunning-Kruger,
yeah, Dunning-Kruger. Yeah, there you go. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in marketing. There's a lot of that in marketing. I'm probably going to get cancelled after this episode, but at least I'm being honest. So.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
You said something about writing. Actually, I can't remember the exact phrase you used, but it says you wanted to do more writing to get stuff down. It made me think about journaling, and I was having that conversation with someone this morning about journaling. It's not something I do, but it's weird that you bring it up in the way you brought it up, because it just made me think, am I missing out on something here? Because I don't really write enough, and I'm wondering if it's like a superpower hack that I'm missing out on.
Well, that's a good question. Well, you'd have to talk to my partner. I definitely don't journal. I'm probably one of the most chaotic, disorganized people you meet, actually.
Okay.
That's definitely why I ended up being a strategist and not like an account person. I'm pretty hectic, but there is a discipline with writing.
Yeah.
It forces kind of clarity of thought, reduction, simplicity, and well, I mean, it's like anything in life. The more you do it, the better you get. Like as I was saying at the beginning, before we went on air, that I watch your YouTube channel, and it is that the more you do it, the easier it gets and the better you get. And I think it's the same with a newsletter and writing. The more you do, the better you get. And it's just like, but it's a long game, like it's the compounding effect. It's going to take years, not months. So and it gives you discipline, like to have to force yourself. God, it sounds awful. Like I force myself to. I enjoy writing it, but because I write it on a Sunday often.
Okay.
And to force myself to write 1,500 words or whatever it's not easy, and it forces discipline. And I think we listen to a lot of similar podcasts, don't we, Chris? And there's a theme that comes up time and time again, which is consistency. And I think discipline and consistency. So I don't think writing or journaling is a superpower, but I think consistency and discipline is a superpower. And I think the newsletter,
I 100% agree with that. Yeah.
And I think the newsletter for me does that. Might not do it for everyone, but that's part. That's a good reason why I do it as well. Yeah.
How often on a Sunday do you think, I just can't be bothered?
Every Sunday?
Yeah.
No.
But that's the power, right? And I wasn't asking you that to set you up, because I knew what the answer would be.
Yeah.
It's like when you mentioned my YouTube channel, or even my podcast. For the amount of times I think, maybe I could just put this off till like next week or whatever. But then you don't, because you've got that rigid structure in place, and you always feel better when you've done it.
Do you know one of the best? It's funny you say that, actually, because I started the newsletter in January.
Yeah.
And it used to be, I tried for the first month I did it every week. I got burnt out. And I was like, look, guys, I'm really busy. I'll do it every other week. And then I dropped off for a month at one point because we won a bunch of new clients or whatever, and my agency Defiant. But then when I was on holiday, I went on holiday in beginning of August, and I got so much positive responses from readers. And that's what drives me forward, really. Like, they were, this is great, blah, blah, blah. And then what I was like, I actually called it out in public. I'm like, moving forward, every Monday morning, you're going to get a newsletter from me, which is going to be high value, breaking down brands, scale-ups, creators, and that. And I think there is a thing whereby if you say it in public, you have to do it. It's similar. I'm not going to talk about my agency much, but it's similar with my agency. Like, I was so scared to launch an agency in a way, because like advertising is a ruthless business, and there's a lot of very talented people, and I was scared about putting myself out there.
Yeah.
They're like, why is he starting an agency, and so on and so forth. But the minute that I proclaimed it on LinkedIn, or the minute that I made it public, I was like, I was in. I had to do it, because it's like I was all in, sort of thing. And it's similar with the newsletter. So I think it is hard. To be really like honest with you, it's really hard. And there are many a Sunday where I'm like, I just want to go back to bed, or I want to watch The Bear. I don't know if you're watching The Bear at the moment. Highly recommend. Or watch The Bear. But then, because I've called myself out in public, I have to commit to it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah,
that accountability is a powerful thing, isn't it?
Massive. Yeah.
What? Because you changed it recently, didn't you? You changed the newsletter. Was that back as a result of when you stopped it?
No. Do you want? There's actually a bit of sleight of hand that I'm doing with the name. Should I tell you the truth behind the name?
Yeah, go for it.
And it might offend some of your listeners. So, for Chris's sake, please don't tune off at this point when I say the honest truth.
Or you can start commenting for engagement on LinkedIn.
Even better. Chris is a seasoned pro. I'm wet behind the ears at podcasts, to be honest.
You can at will.
So the newsletter was originally called Future Famous because not to bore you all with it, but fame has been proven to be the biggest driver of brand growth, right? So it was kind of aligned with that.
Mm-hmm.
Since I started my own agency, we've done a lot of work with scale-ups and startups, and there is, as you know, this whole kind of growth hacking, growth marketing thing.
Yeah.
And I realized quite quickly that it's almost like we're speaking two languages with these people.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? They have this whole kind of like growth mantra that some of them even look down at traditional legacy marketing, like, oh, it's not right. The amount of times in a meeting, it's like, yeah, but you've worked at big brands, you don't get it. I'm like, yeah, all right, mate. So the whole point of calling it Growth Club is to lure in those people from a scale-up startup space,
right,
and then reveal to them actually what works. So it's a bit of a hook. It's a bit of a clickbait to drive them in a way.
Okay, fair enough.
I kind of hate, and sorry if I offend anyone, and even you, Chris, if I say this, I kind of hate the name growth marketing, and I kind of hate the name Growth Club because the reason is all forms of marketing deal in growth. So I don't see. I mean, in a way, growth marketing is genius. It's the best rebrand of a job title ever, but it kind of frustrates me at the same time as well. If that makes sense.
I'm with you, Will. I agree. I think growth. I mean, we're getting into the weeds now. In my opinion, growth is marketing, but marketing isn't necessarily growth.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many different levers you can pull to grow.
Yeah.
Product, brand, tech, all sorts. And it's weird, actually. This debate comes up a lot. I'm in a few marketing WhatsApp groups. It comes up a lot. And you go on LinkedIn, you see jobs and stuff being posted. A lot of people think that growth is just marketing. And it's not, in my opinion.
Okay, well, what does growth do that marketing doesn't? That'd be good to understand, though.
I think growth can look at different ways of growing, not just marketing. For instance, user journey, you might improve the user journey, and then that could have a huge impact on conversions. That's not what marketing is.
So when I worked at big agencies, we used to do UX, user experience, customer journeys. That's how we would do that.
Okay. Ahead of your time then, obviously.
Don't know. Maybe just trying to make more money out of clients. I don't know. One of the two.
Maybe. I don't know. I think... Again, I don't know. It's a big topic. I think, in my opinion, marketing is looking at sort of more campaigns, more social, more brand awareness. Whereas I look at growth, and I think that incorporates all that. But I think there's other stuff that can be done. It might be, referrals, revenues. I like to look at the pirate metrics in growth: acquisition, activation, revenue, referral, and oh man, my mind's gone blank now. The last one, shit.
I think maybe we can agree on one thing, which is I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to like often there isn't tightly defined what marketing is and what growth is, and maybe that's where the confusion lies. So for me, it's interesting what you define marketing as, because I personally would have a different definition of marketing. Mine, by the way, isn't necessarily right or wrong. It's just the way I've been taught, right? So for me,
Ps.
Yeah, the 4 Ps. It's more expansive than promote. So everything you mentioned about marketing for me would be promotion, but you still got place, price, and product as well, right? So yeah. But to answer your question,
you're probably right. It's probably just a very good rebrand that has allowed other people to go and get pay rises. Or I think a lot of it's come from America, from Silicon Valley and the startup world.
100%. I think you're spot on. I think a lot of it comes from America, the West Coast, because it's all that tech. It's like that tech sort of like tech vernacular, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, come on, guys, we got to grow, right? Grow. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it validates completely why you changed the name of your newsletter, doesn't it? Because the market you're trying to interact with is seeing it as a different thing, when actually it's pretty much the same. But
100%.
It's a definition kind of problem.
Yeah, that was going to be my next newsletter, so I can't write about that. It's going to explaining why I called it Growth Club, but I guess I've ruined that one. Never mind.
Go for it. Well, let's talk about, so Sunday rolls around, and you got to stick out your 1,500 words or however many you want to put out. How do you come up with an idea of what to talk about? What's your brainstorming process, research? How do you go about all that sort of stuff?
It's a really good question. It depends on what I'm writing. So probably the longest thing I ever wrote, which I question whether it was worth the effort, was I wrote this really long piece that I think you were saying you've read already, which is community building as a con. Yes. So don't, to your listeners, don't worry. I do actually highly advocate building a community. It's, again, a clickbait title to make the people read and be a bit outraged. Yeah. So, that was a lot of research. So that was like taking the classical Byron Sharp, Les Binet stuff and trying to reconcile it with the world of Colin and Samir and all the stuff I love, essentially. So that was 2 weeks in the making. That was a lot. What I would even argue that's based on my like 15 years experience of like being on the other side of the fence in big brands, right, and traditional marketing. But then like most of my newsletters, they take around about a day, so I'm pretty fast, to be honest.
Okay.
So I look at the one I did on Oatly. That would, because I work with a lot of clients, I use Oatly a lot as a case study of like a great challenger brand or a brand that really nailed like strategy and creative to scale and grow.
Yeah.
So that one I had in my head, and it was just a question of getting it down. So normally about a day. So I spend half the day researching, getting some good data, quotes, and then I just kind of, because I've been doing it a long time, I can write it pretty. I've written. You get to a point in your career where you've done it a lot, and it's just It's kind of second nature. So the research is around about 3/4 of a day, and I can get it down in about a quarter of a day, actually. So a couple of hours, pretty quick. That's why there's so many typos.
I don't think there's anything wrong with typos necessarily. I'm going to use that annoying word, authenticity, but it is you, right? And it is you. You are dyslexic. Like, it's just partly you. And I think that sometimes you can polish stuff so much, it actually loses its magic. Yeah. I do want to ask you something. A phrase you just used, is it worth it? And I guess my thought behind that is a day of your time. That other one you said took you a long, long time. I'm trying to work out whether the whole newsletter space is worth it these days, because it's very competitive and everyone seems to be doing it.
I love this question. I love this question so much. You are so right. It feels like everyone is setting up a newsletter right now, right? Yeah. It's like everywhere you look is like 3 times a week we're going to email you 5 tips how to be more productive. But I think you're right. It's more competitive than ever. But in any market, there's always you're more experienced than me, Chris, in marketing, and you know better than I do. Like, there's always a white space in any market. So I feel there is still a big white space for fewer, bigger, better content. So I don't spam your inbox 3 times a week. It's 1 time a week of high value, high quality, well written, well researched, based on experience newsletter. Because if you look at the vast majority of newsletters, well, I don't know. I've not. Well,
let me ask you, how many do you read, or is there any that stick out for you?
Yeah, there's a couple that I love. I mean, my favorite is a guy called. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's called Digital Native by Rex Woodbury. So
yes, I do get that.
Yeah, he's amazing. So I pride myself on writing a good newsletter, but this guy, he does it every week as well. Okay. He does like more of a venture capitalist sort of investment, digital trends sort of thing. But I don't know how he does it. Like the amount of like research, and it's just like a white paper almost every week.
And will you read that every week without fail?
Yeah. And Zoe Skayman's very good. She's less frequent these days writing, but she really led the. You got to give her credit, to be fair. Like, she wrote the original sort of blueprint for the creator economy, coming from a traditional marketing background. She writes a phenomenal newsletter. She only writes probably like 3 or 4 times a year, but she's fantastic as well. I read all her stuff. But Rex and Zoe, fantastic. But to answer your question, I think, it's more saturated than ever, but it's, why I'll ask you a question. Why are you starting on YouTube? That's more competitive than ever. There's always a white space, and if you're consistent and deliver value, I think you can win the long game. Maybe if we chat in a year's time and I gave it up, you can say, well, that was a waste of time, wasn't it? Well, but I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to skip a question then, and we'll come back to it in a minute. What are your goals with it? Do you have any goals? Do you think about that sort of stuff?
Not really. That's, so I did a philosophy degree at universities, so I was going to get a bit philosophical with this, but I'll try not to. But, so I turned 40 a month ago, and I look back at the first 40 years of my life. One of the biggest mistakes I always did is I always had to have like a stupidly ridiculous big goal.
Yes.
And then strive towards it. And I'd often fail because it was so unachievable that I never do it. And then I read a really good book, I'm sure you've read it, called Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
And that really just shifted my mindset, where stop thinking about big lofty goals and just be consistent and take action every single day. So I have no end game with Grow Club. I just want to see how much action and consistency I can take. So there is no, maybe that's naive and a bit stupid, but there is no end game.
No, it's not naive or stupid. I think that is an amazing answer. And the reason I think it's an amazing answer, because my philosophy is the same with both this podcast and my YouTube channel.
Good to hear, mate.
I look back on some, and I've mentioned this before, but I look back on some of the things I've done in the past and given up for whatever reason. And I just think, where would I be if I just kept going?
I know, right?
and it's an overlooked. That is a superpower, I think.
Yeah, that it's what we said about before. We're talking about consistency and stuff. I mean, that is like for me, it's the most important thing. Like if you can crack that, you're onto a winner.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So there's no end game with Grow Club. It's just consistency. So to any of your readers that end up, any of your listeners that end up reading my newsletter, like if I don't turn up on a Sunday, and if you don't get the email on a Monday, call me out. Like, it's good. Keeps me straight. Yeah.
Okay, well, let me ask you then. So and I should probably ask myself the same question. But at what point does that change? I thought, you're going to be sitting there at 80 something in the old people's home still writing it, without a goal, or is there going to be, well,
I'll be dead before then, to be honest.
But you know what I mean? I'm not saying you should have a goal, and I totally agree with you. I'm just being devil's advocate, I suppose. But at some point, there has to be a reason, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
I think it does. Do you play sport, Chris, or do you what? Yeah. Would you play golf or football? Would you play?
I used to play football when I was younger and a little bit more agile. I'm tennis, golf, cycling, snowboarding.
So I'd ask the same question about your sports. Like, what did you ever think you're going to be?
That's if you enjoy it, right? That's I guess that's the.
Well, I do enjoy it because even though, to go back to your previous question, which was like, do you ever feel like you don't want to write it? And I was like, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
There is pleasure in pain. Like like a big shift in my mentality over the last couple of years has been like, don't seek instant gratification or pleasure, even though like I find it a struggle. There is huge enjoyment, which is different from pleasure, in turning up and doing it every week, and also like it's a bit cheesy, but like I sent out one this morning and I got like 5 emails going, "This is great." Someone called me out on LinkedIn going, "This is the best thing I've read on strategy in a while," blah blah, and that's what keeps me going. Do you know what I mean? That for me is enough motivation to keep going. I get more enjoyment. That is greater than the pain that it takes to write every week. And I'm being so middle class and like first world problem. It's not pain, is it? I'm not like down a mine digging coal. So I'm writing words on a piece of paper. Like it's not that hard. Yeah.
No, it's funny. I was just laughing because my wife kind of laughs at me, like, because I've started this YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I've got, 60 something subscribers. But
well done, mate. By the way, that's not easy. Congratulations.
Thank you. But every time someone comments, or a random comment, someone I don't know comments, it's like that dopamine rush is just unbelievable. And I said to her, I was like, I don't know when these bigger YouTubers, with millions of subscribers, they still get that, or has it become like almost a chore? And I said, it's almost a shame that, don't get me wrong, I do want to grow it, obviously. But at some point, I guess on that growth journey, you lose that intimate thing where, I don't know, some random from Brighton goes, "Oh, I did this and this on my park run." I was like, "Oh, that's wicked."
Yeah.
Because that's like that, just that random person reaffirming that they've watched it and they actually paid attention to it.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? I think you're right.
Yeah.
You lose that intimacy is a great word. You lose that.
Yeah.
I don't imagine I'll ever get that big, to be honest, but I don't know how you can even manage against that, to be honest. It's quite hard. Yeah.
But so, when you said you got your 5 emails back in reply, that I instantaneously knew how much of a buzz you'd have got reading those.
Yeah. No, it means a lot. Like, it's fun. Do you know, the funny thing is, like, if you read some of my previous editions on the newsletter, like, sometimes I just slightly lose my mind when I'm writing it because you get into a hypnotic state. And there's moments when I'm like, oh, it'd be great if someone could leave a comment or reply to me. Like, I don't know if I'm just like, screaming into the void and anyone's actually reading this. Because I used to worry that no one's actually reading it. And, you can look at the metrics, like, you get a good open rate, blah, blah. But you're like, does anyone actually care? So that's why it's great when, to your point, like when you get a reply, it's like, oh yeah, actually spending my Sunday doing this.
Someone cares, right? Even if it's just one person. I can't remember the phrase you used earlier, something about volume and about just that one person replying. It's just amazing.
Totally, yeah.
Okay, so you talk about metrics and stuff. What do you use to write your newsletter?
Pretty old school, really. I just use. I'm a big fan of Google Docs, so I'll write it in a Google Word. The Google version of Word. I'll write it in that. I've got Grammarly, which is dyslexia's best friend, so that's good. And then I use Beehive's amazing for publishing. So I recently moved from Substack to Beehive for a couple of reasons. The first being that it's just a lot more powerful from a metrics point of view. So you can really delve into your individual subscribers, like what they've opened, what they haven't. You can automate stuff. So if someone hasn't read something in 21 days, you can say, I literally set up an automation email yesterday going, Did I offend you? Yeah, clickbait email headline, and then it's like, you haven't read please subscribe, you don't want to be part of it. And also they've got this great thing.
Have any of those gone live yet?
So the automation's gone live now, but
Okay.
I think it's 21 days from today when I set up the optimization.
Okay.
So you'll be getting an email soon, Chris, saying, why haven't you read it?
No, I read this morning. I'd be interested to know how that works, because I think I was reading somewhere about cleaning up your subscriber list and getting rid of, because basically then you're telling the email provider, you get better ratios to your email providers, and it sort of gives a bit of better sign.
Yeah.
And I guess there's no point putting it in someone's inbox if they don't want it. It's just a waste of everyone's time, isn't it?
Yeah, so you're totally right. So it's always a balance between like total readership size versus open rate. So at the moment, I'm about 58% open rate, which is pretty good.
That's great.
But that's just because I'm still quite small. So we're about 2,800 readers at the moment. But as you get bigger,
that's interesting. You call that small. I think that's it's a.
What is good? That's
an interesting discussion point, right? Because
what is good? Yeah, like what is?
You take the Lennies out of the equation, who've probably got millions.
Yeah.
Like if I'd said to you back in, say you started in January, if I'd said to you back then, you can have nearly 3,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
You'd have bitten my hand off, I suspect.
Don't know. I'm probably going to come across like an arrogant sot. I thought I'd do better because I'm very.
I'm not saying that. I didn't mean like. Did you, as in what is better? I guess that's probably a better way of asking the question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I guess my idea of good is changing actually. So I was, when I first started on this journey, I used to look at the people with like the 100,000 followers on LinkedIn and the big newsletters. I was like, I want that, right? But then I had a great conversation with someone. I won't name them, but I had a great conversation with someone the other week. Where he's like, why do you care about having like you're chasing vanity metrics? Like why do you want to go after such a large audience? Actually, it's far better to have a valuable audience. So that idea. So for me, like, and you probably know this already, what a lot of people do to grow their newsletter is they'll repost their content on Reddit forums and stuff like that.
Yes.
But you end up just getting a really low value audience because it's just like randos on the internet, right? And I was so tempted at one point to go down that road, but I held off. And now that's, to go back to the other point about compounding and slow and steady wins the race sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about, I want to grow. I mean, I'd love to in maybe 3 years have 10,000 or whatever, but I want it to be a high value audience with a good open rate. There's no point having another, to go to your previous point about competition, there's no point having a newsletter of 50,000 readers with a 30% open rate and they're all, the people that aren't my target market or people that I want to build a community with. Do you know what I mean? So I think,
Okay. And Beehive, we'll just put on that quickly. You rate that, do you?
Yeah, I used to be on Substack.
So they're doing some pretty amazing things by the sounds of it. They seem to be everywhere at the moment.
Yeah, they're crushing it. So I used to be on Substack, which Substack is great, by the way. It's like super easy to write with. It's like you just see copy and paste it in, they do GIFs and stuff. Beehive has got that same ease of use, but it's just like it's got a great growth engine behind it. So the guys who founded it, right? Their story. Yeah. So the guys who grew Morning Brew, which I think sold for like $75 million. I mean, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Sold for $75 million. They set up Beehive with the idea of creating a newsletter which is easy to write but has a great growth engine behind it, basically. So that's what I love about it. Yeah.
What if you? I don't know if you don't want to ask, I'll let it out. But what plan are you on?
I'm on the. I went all in, so I went on the scale. I think it's called Scale Plan, which is the top. Which is the top plan. Okay. And what that gives you is it gives you more detailed metrics, and it allows you to have a custom domain. So instead of having growclub.beehive.com, it's just like growclub.com essentially and stuff like that. Yeah.
And it also opens up the growth side of things as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a thing called boosts on there, which I've not had time to look at it properly, but basically you can pay to gain a subscriber, but a high value subscriber. But I haven't turned that tap on yet. I think if I ever get to the point of if I ever got sponsorships, if I could get a sponsor for my newsletter, I'd reinvest all that capital back into boosts. I think into growing it. Yeah,
I think you can do it the other way as well, right? So you can advertise on yours to. I think that's what I saw, and I think that's how people were doing it. They were advertising on their own to then fund advertising. I mean, it's a great growth hack, I guess.
Yeah, I've tried. It's funny you say that. Yesterday, I was trying to do that. I applied for a couple of being a booster, getting paid to boost a couple of newsletters.
Yeah.
But I might have been a bit ambitious. I think they're all like 30,000 readers, and they all just said no. So I might have to aim a bit lower.
Oh, is that how it works? Is it you have to get them to sign off and?
Yeah, you know what it's like. It's the same on LinkedIn. Have you noticed how all the big LinkedIn people only shout out big LinkedIn people? It's like it's this like race to the top, isn't it? So, So
okay.
Got to get a bit bigger first. So if your listeners are listening and they're interested, subscribe so I can get on the boost.
I will, and obviously I will link to it in the show notes. Definitely. I tell you, I've messed my questions up now, so I'm not sure. Oh yeah, you talked about metrics. So I'm assuming the very fact that metrics are important to you, you do analyze what's worked, what hasn't worked. Look at each performance of every email you send out.
Yeah, 100%. There is no logic, rhyme or reason to it though. So I probably shouldn't. I'm far too honest. But sometimes I'll rush out a newsletter and go, "Oh, that's not my best."
We've all been there, mate. All been there. Whether it's a social post, a YouTube video, whatever, and it does well, right?
And it does really well. And then other times I'll like really take my time. Like, this is the one, right? This is the one. We're going to be Stephen Bartlett after this. It's going to be massive. Yeah. And I get like 10 unsubscribes at the end of it. And I just can't work it out. So yeah, I do check the analytics, but I certainly haven't got a blueprint for what works and what doesn't. I think what does help, and it's all like obvious advice that people will know already, is like have a consistent time that you deliver. So when you sign up to my email, as you probably know, it says like every Monday morning, 8:30, you'll get this newsletter. It'll be high value. Also, give me a follow on LinkedIn because you can ask me questions. So I think having a consistent, it's like a TV show. Like I think you've got to treat it like a TV show, or you've got to have like this is the time it will be delivered. Because you made a great point before, which is like our inboxes are full of junk, and it's like you've got to get people ready to look for it at that time. Yeah. And I think that helps. But in terms of the content that works and doesn't work, don't know if you ever figure it out, Chris. Let me know because I need help.
I have no idea. I have the same conversation often. You put something out and you think this is the one, this is going to go, and then it's tumbleweeds, and then you put out a lazy one, and then it's suddenly it's not possible. Well, out of curiosity, why did you decide on Monday mornings?
That's a great question. That's a really good. I'm not sure whether it's the right idea. Maybe as a reader, I'd get your feedback now on this. Actually,
it's interesting what you said about the regular. There's a handful of emails that I read regularly. Like I'm signed up to loads of newsletters. I really am. I far more than I actually read, and I'll admit that. But there's a handful that get read every time they come, and two of them in particular come on a Friday morning at about 7:00. One is previous guest of the podcast, Danny Denhard. He has Must Reads newsletter, and the other one is the Upshot, which is a sports email. They just talk about degenerate sports people, but it's quite funny and interesting. But both those come out, and it's good. It's just funny you say it because they come out on Friday morning, and I know every Friday, if I'm up early enough, I'll get my coffee and I'll read them. If not, as soon as I drop the kids off at school, that's the first thing I do. And there's the analogy you said about the TV show, which I found really interesting because I can't remember if this was before we started recording or not, but we were talking about YouTube
and live TV and
live TV.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, that was the thing, right? There was stuff on, and you would make sure you were there every time to watch it.
Yeah, match of the day, all that.
Yeah. I think Monday. I mean, I read yours every Monday. And interestingly, I hadn't twigged that it came out every Monday. I don't know why I hadn't twigged that, although I do read it. But the fact that it's Monday morning, I don't think it's a problem. Like, I don't think there's.
Well, do you not think? I mean, maybe if it's all right, I can ask your listeners. If anyone, any of your listeners, I'd just like to do a quick bit of market research. Drop in the comments. When is the best time? When do you have the most free time to read a newsletter? So I used to deliver it on a Sunday.
Yes.
And if I'm being really honest, my engagement was higher then.
So I can see that.
And I worry that because it's on a Monday morning, it just gets in the backlog of emails. And maybe I am considering moving the day that I put it out. Maybe back to a Sunday or a Friday morning is a good shout as well.
Yeah, I guess backlog of emails, people getting ready for school, work.
Yeah.
Monday mornings generally are pretty busy. I can see why Sunday would be powerful. Yeah. There's certain ones I get every Sunday evening that I notice. I don't know. I guess when it's your target audience as well, right? I mean, can you or do you segment on location?
Yeah, so weirdly, maybe it's because I've grown a lot via LinkedIn, but a lot of it's America. So America and a little bit in Australia, but mainly America is
Right.
where most of my audience readers are
Okay.
from. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the answer is just to test it, see what, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I'll put it out on Sunday, and if I fall to like 10% open rate, I'll revert back to Mondays.
I don't know. I mean, I was having this conversation with a previous guest about the power of commuting had on content. So I used to listen to a lot of podcasts on my commute, and I no longer commute. I work from home, so I don't do that anymore. And as a result, my podcast listening has gone through the floor, much to I don't like it. And I guess it's the same as emails, newsletter. I used to read a lot on the train, whether that's books, blog posts, emails, whatever. I don't know.
Well, maybe I should aim. God, this is a bit like I'm a bit full of myself, but maybe like Sunday, I should go for Sunday because it's more of like a Sunday supplement, isn't it? You know, like you read the business section of the Times or whatever. It's not that, by the way, readers. It's not. This is. It's not like. It's
Put
not
yourself on a pedestal there, Will.
It's more like it's more like the Fun Day Times, maybe, but there is no. I'm just trying to work out. You know, we're both.
I guess the counter to that is: would people see it as a work-related thing?
Well,
and I'm not saying I do. I think it's interesting, but obviously a use case of one's not a.
Well, that's what I would say. I mean, lots of respect for Professor Byron Sharp, but he, you know, it's a tough read his work, isn't it? So I'm definitely not like that. I do try and write it in a lot more kind of, you know, you've seen the way I write. Like it's a lot more kind of like conversational, isn't it? I'd like to think.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not too heavy reading, but it's a good point. Like maybe it's a bit too. Yeah, maybe people want to like not think about brands on a Sunday. To be honest.
I mean, why does it have to be a Sunday or a Monday? What's
It could be any day. I mean, I know guys who do some people who do really well put it on a Wednesday morning. Like the digital native one I mentioned by Rex, I think is every Wednesday morning. At the moment, the reason it's on a Monday, to be honest, is because I work incredibly hard from Monday to Thursday with my clients.
Right.
And then Friday is the day that I'm like, no meetings on a Friday, although that's increasingly getting disrespected. and I write on a Friday, but there's no reason I couldn't write on a Friday, put it out on a Wednesday. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Or a Friday, yeah.
It's funny you say about the digital native and Rex. I didn't know that came out on a Wednesday morning either, but I read that regularly. And I'm trying to work out in my head why I know that those two come out on a Friday morning. And I'm not quite as aware of other ones coming out at certain times. Because I think if you can get that
cadence,
trigger,
frequent, yeah.
in someone's head, then that's the game changer.
Do they call it out on their newsletter? So, you know, like at the top of mine, it's like, welcome to blah, blah. Do they call it out at the top of the fold?
Let's have a look. I don't know. I mean, it might be that because I know Danny and I've had him on the podcast. I don't know. Like, it could be this, that over time it's become a thing. I don't know. But that's the key, isn't it? If you can get that, train people to believe that every time. That's interesting. If you Google it, Substack still comes up. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, I was going to say it's habit form because on the one side, I think like this idea of live TV or programmatic TV. What I mean by that is like people tuning in at a certain time for a TV show is kind of on the decline. However, I do believe in this trying to establish a habit. Like, you know, it's interesting what you said about those two newsletters on a Friday. You set time aside on a Friday to read it. And that is if I could achieve anywhere near that, that would be amazing. But I'm still trying to figure that out.
I guess the streaming digital version of that is, so I don't know if you're familiar with the program Only Murders in the Building.
No, I've not heard of that, no.
It's on Disney. It's got Steve Martin, Selena Gomez and Martin Short. And it's like, it's a very good program. But the new series came out of that a couple of weeks ago, and it comes out every Tuesday. So it hasn't got that time definition, but every Tuesday evening we're watching that.
There you go.
Similar thing. Danny's Must Read says Must Read is delivered every Friday morning.
There you go. It's imprinting in your brain, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's the key. I think that's the key. I think if you can get people to be expecting it and waiting for it.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do.
Study.
In the newsletter next week, I want to put a little survey in and then see what people say, like when is a good time, and see if I get any responses on that. And then I'm going to experiment with it because I'm always trying to drive that open rate a bit higher. I mean, I'm at 60% now, which is really good, but like if I can get it even higher, that would be amazing.
Well, not only that, but it provides a bit of content for you, right? It's a case study for future editions.
Yeah, like analyze my own newsletter. It's like meta. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
That's trendy. That is. Okay. What's something you struggle with or find tough?
Beyond the newsletter and life.
Well, depends how open you want to be, Will. About the newsletter.
About the newsletter. I think it's the thing. It's the thing that I struggle with the most. But as we talked about, it's the most beneficial. Is just turning up and consistency.
Yeah.
It's getting. Don't get me wrong. It gets easier over time, but it's still hard. When it's 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning, it's like deep breath. Okay.
And how many times has it gone from being I don't really fancy this to flirting with that's it, I'm not last one or I'm not doing it anymore?
Well, I think since I've rebranded it and I've forced myself to go every week, it's been all right since then. I think when we won a load of new clients in my agency, kind of the end of May, beginning of June, I was just looking at the roadmap of work we've got coming in my company, and I'm like, I need a day off. Do you know what I mean? So that was probably the last big time I was like, am I really going to do this? And then I went on holiday for 2 weeks, which, as you know, really helps, and it resetted me. So that's really good. I think the other thing, the longer term thing I am going to find difficult, and it's going to be a challenge to my content, is running out of interesting brands to talk about.
Yeah.
So I think like the one I did this week was more generalist about like what is good strategy, how to avoid, the 3 red flags to avoid in bad strategy. So that's why I might have to broaden my.
I guess the way around that is you could almost, and this might lead on to my next question, but you could almost find boring brands and how you would make them interesting, or how they could.
That's a great idea.
So on that note, how much does your newsletter tie in with Defiant and vice versa? Have you had any people who have come to Defiant as a result of seeing your newsletter, or have you had anyone you've had in the sales funnel cross the line because of the newsletter? Has there been any crossover?
Not really. I think we've had like a bit of warm leads. You know this though from your experience. Like to get a big client, it's a long lead time, right?
Yeah.
So the newsletter's only been going 8 months. So we've had a couple of bites. Nothing. It's not like going to change the world of new business. I don't think big agencies have anything to worry about. Do you know what I mean? We're not like we haven't got Nike. There are a few people from Nike reading it, but like no one from Nike's like gone right. Let's do something. So
yeah.
For me, it's less about immediate lead generation thing. What was your? Sorry, I lost my trail of thought there. So what were you saying? Sorry, before.
I was just trying to work out if there was any relationship between the newsletter and Defiant.
So I think we've had a bit of interest, nothing major. I think the more I write it, I think they're kind of separate entities.
Okay.
I mean the inconvenient truth is like there's quite a lot of people who read my newsletters who are like chief strategy officers at big agencies, and I know they're reading it. They never share my content. They never talk about it, but they read every week. So, a lot of my competition are reading it.
Danny Denhard said the exact same thing on his podcast.
Did he?
And he said, and I apologize, Danny, because I'm paraphrasing it, but he said that one of the struggles he had with growing it was because people didn't want to share it.
Exactly.
They almost didn't want to admit that that's where they were getting their ideas from.
100%. 100%. That is single, but that's why if you read a couple of my editions, the amount of times I like literally call out like, "You please share this, please share this."
Yeah.
And the only people that share it are lovely client, people who are brand side or kind of junior people who just like love the value and stuff like that. But the big dogs never share it, and that is the deep frustration. Yeah. Because what annoys me is like, it doesn't look bad on them if they share it. Like if I think a lot of them have the mindset as if they shared one of my posts.
Yeah,
that one of their clients is going to go over to me. It's like that's never going to happen. Like it's like a different end game. So I totally relate to that, and it is a deep frustration. I remember once actually I took it too far. I wrote a newsletter once, and at the end it's like, look, I know all you chief strategy.
Call them out.
Literally, I know all you're reading, and you're never going to share it. Enjoy the content. Blah blah blah. So yeah,
I guess you got to take it as a compliment.
Yeah, but it costs them nothing to share on LinkedIn, does it? That's all I'd say.
No. But if it wasn't providing such value to them, they wouldn't be. Keep it close to their chest.
Maybe if it was terrible, they'd share it to destroy my agency. I don't know.
Yeah. Like a bluff. Okay, so you love it. Are there any newsletter writers out there that you would love to shadow for the day?
Well, I think it come back to Rex actually.
Do you know him?
No, we used to talk on Twitter a bit, so I kind of growth hacked my Twitter account ages ago.
Okay.
and we were on the same trajectory. So we talked a bit, but I don't know him personally. No, he's based in America somewhere. But no, I just want to like figure out how the hell does that guy find time to like write and research something so
Well, there you
original
go. Get in touch
everywhere.
with him. I mean, that's a future. That's a future newsletter edition, right? Is the case study of Rex and Rex Woodbury. That's his name, isn't it?
Yeah, Woodbury. Yeah. Maybe I should
Yeah.
reach out and do a thing on him. Actually, I think because what you're doing is very interesting as well with your podcast. You know, you interview these different people with followings, and it's a really clever way to do it. And I think maybe I should consider doing something like that as well. Actually, and I think talking to someone like Rex would be a great idea. Actually, yeah.
There's what is her name? There's a woman called Chanel or something. You might have heard her because I'm pretty sure she was on Colin and Samir.
Yeah.
And she writes a growth podcast. A growth newsletter. And she basically analyzes how people have grown,
Social followings and stuff.
How newsletters have grown.
Oh wow! I need to read this. Yeah. Okay.
I'll send you the link after, and I will also link to it in the show notes.
Amazing.
It's gonna bug me. What's her name?
That sounds right on my street. To be fair, yeah.
Hold on, let me find it. Pro podcasting. There we go. Chanel. Growth in Reverse. It's called.
Growth in Reverse. Let's have a look.
But she talks about newsletters and how they've grown and breaks down their how they've done it and their strategies and the rest of it. So it's a really interesting read, and I think her growth as a result has been pretty impressive. I heard her on a podcast recently, which I will find and also send to you.
Because what she's clever. I love her CTA on her landing page. By the way, it's like get the roadmap to replicate their growth and save 40+ hours of research. I mean, that is such a strong call to action. Yeah, that's amazing. But what she'll be doing, obviously, is like she'll be writing about these creators who will then, some of them will then share her content.
They do. They do.
Yeah.
I often see, or they'll engage with her posts. And the podcast I listen to, which totally escapes me, they said that on the. He asked her that is like how many people do it, and she said some will DM her and talk to her, and others will share it. And she said even the ones who DM me is a positive thing because I'm then in their network and and the rest of it. So it's it's an interesting approach.
So she's like almost like the Colin and Samir of newsletters. Well, I know they've got their own newsletter, but it's kind of
she's niched into that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, niched into that. Yeah.
I will hunt the podcast down. I'll send it to you.
Perfect. Thank you, man. That sounds right on my street. That actually.
But yeah, give Rex a shout, and then you can talk about his growth, and you've made a friend as well.
Yeah. No, he just launched his. The power of community, right? He's now at 50,000 readers, and he's just launched his own venture capitalist fund.
Okay.
So he's got a Discord full of high value founders, CMO, people like you, and now he's got a venture fund off the back of it. So it shows the power of community, doesn't it?
It does. Do you see yourself doing something similar in the future?
I don't know. As I said, there's no end game for me. I just want to see how consistent I can keep it. I think we talked about it before we went on air. There's the great community marketing meetup, isn't there? So I think that's already been done.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do a better job than they do. I really like Joe. I think he's a lovely guy, and I think he does amazing things in what he does. So I've got no interest in that really. I just see how far I can get it, and just.
Have you spoken on there?
Yeah, I shared with him that community is a con thing, where I actually show why community building is hugely powerful. I sent that to him, and he read it, and he said, "Yeah, I love it. It's a really good read." That's the only discourse we've had. I said, I would love to get involved with the marketing meetup if you ever want me to do a talk or help. Yeah. But I think he's so big now. I just think he gets so much inbound. I think he probably doesn't know who I am, to be honest. But yeah.
I don't know. I disagree with that. I think, and take this in the manner of which it's meant, but they've just released their next season, and there was quite a few people on there I'd never heard of before.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some big names. But yeah, I can imagine they get inundated with people requesting to talk.
Yeah, well, he was ahead of what I love about Joe is whether it was by accident or intentional, he was just so ahead of the curve. Community building is everyone's trying to do it. Everywhere, maybe it's the people I follow on LinkedIn. Everyone is trying to grow on LinkedIn. Everyone is trying to do a newsletter, podcast, whatever. And he's just so ahead of the curve. And I just think the guy was an absolute genius what he did.
Well, do you know what? Do you know why I think he's been so successful? So him and James both have been guests on this podcast, actually. name drop. The reason I think they've been so successful is because I think they were so authentic in the way they did it, and it wasn't
100%.
a commercially driven at all costs thing. And I think their intentions were actually pure.
100%. That's why that's what I like about Joe. Like, you can see, like, what if I can be really blunt, like, what I hate now is you see a lot of people trying to grow a following to commercialize it.
Yeah.
Like, throw them in a Slack group, blah, blah, blah. With Joe, it's all about, I remember reading the site. I remember hearing him on a podcast, might have been yours actually, where he talks about the reason he did it is he just felt like a bit isolated and lonely as a marketer, because he wasn't in London, was he? He was out in the sticks somewhere. And I think it does, as you say, come from a place from real authenticity, and people want that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. They value that, I think. So I think he's great. I think what they've done is amazing. Yeah. Really good.
You raise a really interesting point there about the community aspect and how people are just trying to grow to monetize. It's almost a bit of a scourge on society at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's not. I mean, it's not a scourge. I mean, people want to make a living, right? I mean, there are varying degrees of it. There are some total scourges, which is like people just like, like trying to sell copywriting courses for LinkedIn. It's like, go on, whatever. Or people selling personal branding courses. Sorry to be simple.
I guess what I meant by scourge, just to clarify, like, so I'll get cancelled for that now.
Yeah, you might want to edit that out of the podcast, to be fair. Yeah.
I guess what I was trying to say was, people are trying to grow to monetize, and I get it. Like, everyone has to make a living.
Yeah.
But what people are selling is not always that original, or standout, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you say that, because that's the point I was going to make, which is what I'm trying to figure out now. I think the obvious thing now would be to build a community or something, right?
Yeah.
But everyone's doing it. I'm trying to figure out what is the next thing. So if you started a community 10 years ago, you're absolutely, you're ahead of the curve. But there has to be something that comes next. I haven't worked out what that is. But I think figuring out what the next thing is and not trying to build yet another community is the white space. But that's like predicting the future. I'm just trying to keep an eye on what that might be, I think.
It's funny you bring that up. I'm doing the same. I'm thinking like that. I'm like I feel like I've missed so many trends over the last 20 years from, whether it's community to Bitcoin to whatever. And I'm trying to rack my brains now, or, even just audience building or content creation or whatever it is. Like, even if you started on LinkedIn 5 years ago, the organic reach was so powerful that actually building an audience was probably, in real terms, pretty easy.
10 times easier, I reckon, easily. It was even easy, I reckon. When did you start yourself on LinkedIn, Chris? When did you start taking it seriously?
I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, but I probably, I don't know, a year ago.
Yeah, so I was probably a bit less than you, so I started in November. I'm sure do you not think the same? I think when you first started, it was a lot easier than it is now. Yes. It's so much harder to cut through now on LinkedIn, I think.
Do you know, this is an interesting topic. Do you know what I really don't understand? Is why, actually, let me rephrase it. I do understand to a certain degree why they do it, but I also don't understand why these social networks throttle organic reach so much.
Well, yeah, you know why they do it, because they get.
No, I know, but I feel like there's a balance somewhere where they get their revenue from paid spend.
Yeah.
Whereas in the people like myself and yourself, we're not going to pay to put our personal posts in front of an audience.
No.
Like Nike and Reebok and whoever, they might do. And I just feel like they're all competing with each other. And for me, I feel like one of the biggest growth hacks they could all apply is just boosting organic reach for Joe Public.
Well, do you know what? It's really interesting you raised that point. So I'm sure you've seen that LinkedIn is kind of making some interesting moves at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I think I used to love Twitter. I think Twitter's an absolute dumpster fire now. And I don't know if you agree with this, but I think a lot of people have transitioned from Twitter into LinkedIn. So you have seen a lot more people active on LinkedIn recently. Even the people that makes me laugh. There used to be people who used to call out people like me, call them LinkedIn bros, or whatever. Even those guys are now on LinkedIn posting.
Yeah.
But what LinkedIn's doing now is they have a couple of things. They've got a new creator program where you can become every 90 days you can become a top voice in a niche, or they have the golden ticket.
Did I see you get one of those? That was you yesterday, day before?
Yeah, I got a top voice for brand strategy, which was cool. I was totally unexpected. I was pretty blown away to get that. Actually, all that spamming of content paid off in the end. which is great. So they've got that, but also there is, I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but there is like a proper creator. So there's the LinkedIn creator thing where everyone knows about, I think, where you can go and work with LinkedIn directly for 6 weeks and they'll train you up. They'll select so many people in a cohort. I haven't applied for that, to be honest, but I know people have done it. Then the other thing I've heard off the radar is when you get to a certain level and if they like your content, they will actually work with you and tell you about changes to the algorithm, and they'll even give you new tools and stuff like that. Because what they are trying to do, LinkedIn, to be fair, I think they see what's happening in Twitter and what a dumpster fire is. And I think they are trying to champion people who are creating high value content. Because in my opinion, and I apologize to any of your listeners who get offended by this, I think LinkedIn's biggest problem right now is there are a lot of people with like 100,000 followers. I'm not going to name names. There's one guy in the marketing niche. He's like in his early 20s. He's got over 120,000 followers. All he does every day is post a meme about marketing. It's just like the most low, it's funny, but it's just like super low value content. And I think LinkedIn, and I hope this is the case, I think they're getting to the point where they're trying to grow the quality of content, kind of like YouTube, and reduce that kind of cat video equivalent content.
Are you happy to talk about your approach to LinkedIn? Would you rather?
I can do, but I don't think I'm the best. I mean, there's people that have grown far quicker than me, Chris, but I'm happy to talk about it. Yeah.
I know, but maybe. But I am curious. I mean, I like I said before, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn. I do see the value.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I hated and why I stopped posting, I went through a phase I was posting every day. And I found myself slipping into the trap of posting something. And it wasn't quite as low threshold as a meme or a cat video. Sometimes it was probably, but
Chris, if you did, we wouldn't be connected, mate. So I don't
know. I'm just trying to work out how I see the value in it, and I think I'm trying to take away stuff. Is how to grow. Like, what have you seen that works? How's your approach to it? Because you post very regularly, right?
Well, I don't post every day. No. I post 3 times a week now. So I post on Monday, Wednesday.
And is that a planned number?
No, it's because I'm too busy on my day job. Okay. So as you know, some of the people on LinkedIn, it's their full-time job, right? So they're on it 7 days a week, grinding it out. I don't have the capacity to do that. I'm currently working on 6 clients as well as doing what I'm doing on LinkedIn. So I just don't have the time. And also it comes back to kind of what I was saying about the newsletter. I just think it's like fewer, bigger, better. Do you know what I mean? Like post less often, but post high value content. But even then, like I that's why I was like, I'm happy to talk about it, but I don't think I'm the best person because I can't figure it out. So I was like stuck at 8,000 followers for a long time. And then I had one carousel that went really well, got about 600 interactions, like a couple of 100,000 impressions, which was good. Yeah. Got a few K subscribers off it. I'm like, right, well, this is the secret, right? And so I doubled down on this and it just plateaued. Do you know what I mean? So I can't work it out. And then there's a guy, I won't name his name, but there's a really good guy in my niche who went from 2K to 20K in next to no time. Yeah. And I'm like, what's the point? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I've been grinding far longer, but
I have this theory about LinkedIn that the people who grow are the ones selling the shovels. And what I mean by that is the ones who are talking about
how to grow on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Whether that's copywriting, whether that's carousel design, whether that's whatever. And they're almost shooting fish in a barrel that is LinkedIn because everyone wants to grow.
But the funny thing is that, again, it comes back to what we talked about before about value of audience versus value of size of audience.
Yeah.
So if you look at a lot of those kids, because they're often very young kids, right? They're in their early 20s, who talk about LinkedIn and that. Don't get me wrong, they're good at what they do. I give them every credit for that. But I think the reason I would never go down that road is if you look at their audience who interacts on their comments, half of them are ghostwriters or LinkedIn experts, and it's the same people talking to the same people in this like weird sort of like bubble.
Echo chamber.
And that's why I've never been tempted to go down that how to grow on LinkedIn content route, because I just stick to what I know, stick to my niche, and try and attract like a high value audience, I think. So.
Oh, I get that, Will. I think what I'm trying to point out is a lot of people compare themselves to those people.
Right. Yeah.
And thinking, why, I'm talking about whatever. Why am I not growing at the same rate? But actually, because your target audience is smaller, you're never going to.
Well, that raises a good question, actually. Have you ever come across anyone, well, like Mark Ritson's the only one who's got a massive, maybe Mark Ritson's the only one who's got a massive following, and he's an expert in what he does, isn't he? So he's one of the few exceptions of like really owning a niche but having a massive audience. But it's because he's got a very reputable CV, amazing experience, and he's and similar to Stephen, we were talking about Stephen Bartlett before we went on air, and how he publicizes the hell out of his podcast to drive reach and following, whatever. You could argue Mark Ritson. I hope Mark Ritson hears this one day because he's going to hate this.
He's a regular listener, Will, don't worry.
But in a way, hear me out, Mark Ritson is kind of like the Stephen Bartlett of LinkedIn because he has Marketing Week. Every week he writes that that column that promotes his own personal brand and drives ultimately to LinkedIn or his social platforms. Yeah. His content is far better for marketing than Stephen Bartlett, but I think that's the reason he's allowed to grow. I think the big thing is like finding ways to grow off platform is the way to do it, but I haven't got the time or experience to do that really. So.
Well, that's the time, money, and experience, right? I mean, that's a full-time job. You're basically asking to market yourself like some of the companies we work with to market themselves, and they've got 100 people marketing teams working there. It's just
it is funny though. Like one thing I will say, there's a guy that I follow in America who's a copywriter. He writes really good content about advertising.
Right.
And he was only writing about advertising. Then I saw he's at around about 40,000 followers now. And he suddenly started going, oh yeah, and by the way, now I do LinkedIn ghostwriting. So even he's like, I'll just give you the money and shut up. Do you know what I mean? Like, so that there is this temptation, or like a lot of people get tempted by the quick money or the quick wins and fall into it. Do you know what I mean?
Here's a question for you then. Mm-hmm. How much money do you actually think is in LinkedIn ghostwriting? And I ask that because there seems to be A, so many, and B, I don't know anyone who's openly admitted to me anyway, pays to have their LinkedIn post written. Or how much would you pay for that service?
Well, I know definitely some of the bigger creators are definitely getting ghostwriters on. Stephen Bartlett doesn't write his own post.
No, but I would imagine that he's probably got someone in his team creating his own content.
That's true. He doesn't have an agency probably yet. Yeah. Although, the guy that helped grow Stephen Bartlett's podcast has got a personal branding agency.
Yeah, Ash Jones, yeah.
Ash, yeah, he's really good. I don't know. I mean, I've heard some of these, it might all be smoke and mirrors, but I've heard some of them are charging from 5 to 10K a month per client.
And that's what I'm hearing. Well, I'm hearing that probably from them.
Yeah.
Like on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm trying to work out is it actually a lucrative business, or is it all smoke and mirrors and they're just faking it till they make it?
I think it will. I think it might be a bit of smoke and mirrors. I like that old saying. It's not a saying, but it's a phrase, isn't it? Where like when people are posting a lot, or when people are really noisy, they're not that busy. When it's the quiet ones that are making the money, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure there will be amazing ghostwriters out there who aren't like on the platform all the time, bigging themselves up, who are probably making quite decent money.
Yes.
But the 21-year-old with the fluorescent background and the cut-out profile picture, who has a name something like helping you to exponentially grow your personal brand, blah blah blah. They're probably not making that much money. So I reckon there will, like anything, there's a market for it, right? So there'll be people making money out of it, but I think it's the people we probably don't know. I imagine.
I was trying to work out in my head how much I would pay for that service, and I guess it depends on anything, right? It depends what the ROI is.
Yeah.
But when you see that they're getting clients who are paying 3, 4, 5 grand a month, I don't know, that number doesn't quite stack up in my mind. But
so I'll tell you, I'm probably going over now. Sorry, Chris, I'm probably boring you. But
no, mate, you go. All the time in the world.
So what is funny? So we have an office in Soho. It's part of a co-working space, right?
Yeah.
And randomly, you get a coffee and just get talking to people. And one of them works out a LinkedIn ghostwriting, a personal branding / LinkedIn sort of growth agency. And what's interesting about that is they didn't tell me who the clients were, but they've got a few high profile clients. And what's interesting though is it's all these like little ghostwriters that work together, and you'll notice, you can spot it a mile off, because all these big, really good creators, really good influencers or whatever on LinkedIn, you'll notice that the same influencers are commenting on each other's posts all the time.
Yes, yeah.
And that's not, they might be mates, but the real reason is they're all at the same ghostwriting agency or LinkedIn agency.
Okay.
That's for me what I think happened, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, we'll move on before we upset the rest of LinkedIn.
Yeah, I've just lost 5,000 followers. Thanks for this.
I'm asking my questions out of order, which is why I'm kind of going off track a little bit. But
no, it's all good.
I haven't asked you about standing out, have I? What's the best way to stand out from the crowd with the newsletter?
It's a good question. Do you think I'm standing out? I don't know. Maybe I'm not.
I do. I don't know.
No.
No, I do. No, you do, because, like I said, you're one of the few that I actually read regularly.
Yeah.
But I guess from my point of view and my listeners' and viewers' point of view, I'm trying to work out what you've done to make that happen. Has it been something you've thought about? Or is it just, you said earlier you've been working in this industry a long time, and actually your knowledge and experience is at a level now that, has that kind of trust factor and that wisdom that you don't get in someone with less experience. I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm going for. So I think the only ace up my sleeve is my experience, really. Well, that and the ability to simplify stuff. So I think I'm very fortunate, as I said, I've worked with like Nike, Adidas, Meta, Amazon. I've worked on some pretty cool brands, right? Won awards in strategy and stuff like that. But the problem with a lot of strategists is they're very ivory tower. They're very overly complicated, or they're like a bit ego driven, whatever. Maybe it's because I'm Northern, right? Or maybe it's because I'm dyslexic. I don't know. But I have a great ability to take the complex, make it really simple and understanding. But then I always back it up with experience. I think the problem with a lot of newsletters is either people write in a niche they don't know about, and it's just low value content. So hopefully the reason I am standing out, I mean, I get a good referral rate, which is good, is because I write about what I know, but I write about it hopefully in quite an interesting way. Like, I always reread my newsletter 3 to 4 times to make sure it flows really well and it's like very readable. So, and I think, unfortunately, I'm not writing about like football or something way more interesting, but I do have that in mind where I'm trying to take something like a brand, but tell it in a really interesting, captivating way. I'm always trying to make sure that people get to the end of the newsletter in the style that I write. So I think how do I stand out? It's probably my experience working with those great brands, awards, and all that, and then just making it accessible. Like, we don't need another overly complicated planner strategist in the world, I think.
Yeah, I like the making complex things simple.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of people do it the other way around. They try and make themselves sound brighter, or
that's the biggest red flag for me in strategy. If you ever come across a strategy guru online and they're using big flowery language or complex words, they're just masking their lack of understanding or real experience. No, look, I've been really lucky. I've had some of the best bosses in the world, and I'm not going to name names, but I've had some terrible bosses. And the thing that separates them, the really good ones, they're so good at it, they can just distill it down into a really simple, powerful thing. The bad ones, they're writing Campaign magazine every week, a really complicated essay. But when it comes to like cold face of strategy, absolute rubbish. Yeah. I'm never going to work it. How my agency works out, I'm never going to get hired again.
I'm sure it will. Where are we up to? Okay. If someone asked you, and they wanted to start their own newsletter, what would you say to them? I'm always curious. Do many people ask you?
Yeah. So a few people have. Yeah. Since the beginning of the year, probably about 10 people have asked me.
And is this people like sort of in the professional world, or is it people outside of the professional world?
Everyone, all walks of life, Chris. So you've got everything from my mate at home. So he's in a totally different sector. He's like mega brain. He's like a PhD in PhD in like statistic modeling. Works in the energy sector.
Okay.
And he's like, I'm going to start. If you can, we're all mates, so we have a bit of fun. He's like, if you can write a newsletter, I definitely can. What do I do? And I'm like, all right. And I said, well, your problem, mate, is you're a bit complicated. Keep it simple. Keep it entertaining. Yeah. Now, the thing I always say to people is like, be careful. I know you probably think it's a lot of work. It's more work than you think it is. So I was talking to one of our lovely clients the other day. They've got a big database in the sports niche, a current customer database of about 700,000 in the UK. And they're like, oh yeah, they want me to write. She's like head of brand or like VP marketing, quite very senior. And she's like, they want me to write the newsletter as well because it's a scale up, all hands on deck. And I'm like, you might want to hire someone. It's going to take a lot of your time. So the advice I give is it's harder than you think. It does take a lot of work.
Yeah.
I think I might be wrong, but my hypothesis, the world doesn't need another email with like 3 top tips 3 times a week. So do it fewer and better. And play to your strengths. Like, I think, Chris, be honest, like if I was writing a newsletter about how to bake cupcakes, you would never read it because I'm terrible at it. But I think hopefully you read it because I've got a bit of credibility and experience and I'm authentic with it as well. So it's hard work. Fewer is better. high quality, and play to your strengths. I think that's always the advice I would give.
Solid advice. I like that.
Thank you, mate.
Final question for you, Will. If we spoke again in 12 months and you said to me, do you know what, it's been a really successful year for Grow Club, what would have happened?
Let's be ambitious. I'm going to go for 10,000 readers. That's what I'm aiming for.
Okay.
This probably won't happen, but because unless those agency CSOs start sharing my newsletter, which they won't. No, I don't know. Just as I said, for me, it's about the process, taking action every week. But if I was to put an arbitrary figure on it, let's just put 10K on the wall, see if we can do that.
You mentioned that, just going back to a previous question, you said something about your referral rate was really good. Is that something you actively work on? Because I know the power of referral and word of mouth, obviously, as I'm sure you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a metric that doesn't get talked about a lot. But obviously you look at it, and I was wondering your thoughts on it. Is it something you're actively trying to encourage?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, isn't it? Having worked on big brands, and they always tell you that loyalty is dead and it's all about reach, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
But when you do something like a newsletter, in a weird way, it's kind of inverse, because actually, loyalty and advocacy is the most important thing. Because going back to your point before, that there are so many newsletters that you are subscribed to, but there's only a handful that you'll read.
Yeah.
And I think testimonial and word of mouth and recommendation from someone you trust gets that email opened. And then it's down to the content, obviously. But that's why I think referrals are so important.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, I drive a lot of top of funnel through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Because I'll do like good quality content, want my best, come in here, which is good. But I think it's still some random bloke on LinkedIn talking about strategy. Do you know what I mean? But if your mate was like, oh, Will Poskett's Grow Club, it's really good, check it out, you're more likely to give it a go. So I think referral it's the hardest thing to do, because, sorry, if anyone listening to this reads my newsletter, don't take this the wrong way, but like, it's hard because people are busy, and you sharing their newsletter is probably far down on their priority list in their busy life. But if you can get them to do it, and I'm still trying to figure that out, it's good, but I'm trying to get it better. Yeah. And get them to do that. I think it's that is the key to real growth, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you for sharing so much insight and information today. You haven't let me down. It's been a great episode. If anyone wants to come and say hi to you, check out what you're up to, where should I point them? LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn or the newsletter, probably LinkedIn.
Okay.
And then if
I will link to both in the show notes, obviously.
So on LinkedIn, like I post, as I said, 3 times a week, trying to like just offer some free value, kind of explaining what strategy works. I do breakdowns of like famous brands and creators and stuff, which is always like top level, obviously. But then if you want the best stuff, I think the newsletter is the way to go.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would encourage everyone to go and check it out. Will, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, mate.